Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Katina Mason, and I have had the honor and the privilege of being an ISA mathematics coach in Detroit and project manager for a combination of about 4 years. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Fenot Aklog is the Director of Research and Development of the National Center for Restructuring Education, School, and Teaching, also known as NCREST, at Teachers College in at Columbia University, which has been a strategic partner of ISA since 2001. Dr. Aklog also serves as an adjunct associate professor in the International and Transcultural Studies Department at Teachers College, Columbia University, where she teaches education research methods and international education policy courses. Her interests relate to bridging the gap between research and practice at the school and classroom levels, survey research design and instrument development and education policy, planning and technical assistance in the middle and low income countries. Dr. Aklog holds a doctorate from Teachers Columbia University, a master's from Harvard University, and a bachelor's from Brandeis University. And without further ado, here she is.
Great. Thank you, Katina. Hi, everyone. So you might be wondering, what is a professor from Teachers College, Columbia University doing here talking about ISA? What's the relationship? So as Katina mentioned, NCREST has been the strategic partner of ISA since 2001. That's when ISA made the transition from being a after-school program to a whole school sort of reform organization. And ISA, as a staff member, ISA holds a sort of special place in my heart and mind. That year, 2001, I was a first-year doctoral student at Teachers College, starving doctoral student in New York City, looking for a way to pay my rent and eat. Saw an advertisement for a research assistant position at NCREST because they had this new client called ISA that they were working together with to sort of think about what it means, what that model is, how to develop it, and what are some of the structures and processes and practices that should go into this sort of reform model. So I got hired, and I spent that first 2 or 3 years when ISA was working with 3 schools in New York City, sitting in classrooms and talking to teachers and talking to students and shadowing students to sort of get that sort of helping ISA to sort of articulate what that model is. So for me to be here, okay, and to continue to share the story and the journey of ISA all these years later is particularly special to me. All right, so I'll stop my spiel. So what I'm here to do today is to share with you some of the data and the evidence that we have about ISA's impact on student outcomes, right? So just to reiterate, Stephanie talked a little bit about the model. So the ISA model, or the approach, is based on these 7 sort of research-based principles. So the first is the implementation of a college preparatory instructional program. And this instructional program and the core academic program of ISA schools really focus a lot on inquiry and the embedding of numeracy and literacy skills across the content areas, not just in ELA and not just in mathematics. An extended school day and school year, which is designed to sort of provide additional opportunities, whether be they remediation or enrichment for students. The notion of continual professional development, of course, is a key component of the ISA approach. Distributed counseling, we heard a lot about how faculty in ISA schools take sort of the shared responsibility for the well-being of students, both academic and social emotional. The notion of a dedicated team of teachers contributes to the creation of personalized learning and teaching environments at the school. the importance of parental involvement and engagement in children's education, as well as this notion of schools continually engaging in a process of collecting data and monitoring student progress and development. So that's the ISA model. You've also heard today that it is not a one-size-fits-all or a off-the-shelf approach. Let me just go back one second. These 7 principles are really aimed to work synergistically and to serve as a framework for partner schools to start the process of transforming their organizational practices, their instructional practices, in ways that helps create this personalized learning environment and a rigorous educational program. Okay, so very quickly, you've heard that the ISA approach is evidence-based. So what do we mean? How do we know that? Well, we know that because there is a pretty substantial body of evidence now that is showing that this approach seems to have a pretty profound effect on students' progression and completion in high school. So for example, there are 2 external, very rigorous evaluations that were done on the ISA model. And both of these studies show that the ISA approach to whole school reform has large and very positive and statistically significant effects on things like attendance, like grade promotion, credit accumulation, on-time graduation, and college enrollment and persistence rates. So, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a deep dive on one of these studies, right? Can't go through all of it. So in addition, so there's 2 external evaluation reports. There's also this study that was done of all New York City public schools, small schools of choice. Small schools of choice means when schools are created intentionally and deliberately to be small, right? So to create that personalized environment, right, where each grade level doesn't have more than 100 kids, right? So they did a study, and within that study, there were 12 ISA schools included. And what they found was these small schools of choice increased the percentage of students who were on track to graduation by the end of 9th grade. And also the percentage of students who graduated on time. And that increase in percentages is equivalent to the size of the gap in graduation rates, 1/3 of that gap between white students and students of color. The third source of evidence that of ISA's effectiveness is in 2015, the US Department of Education identified ISA as sort of meeting their standards for being an effective whole school transformation organization. And part of that designation required that ISA submit their evidence and go through this sort of rigorous review process by the What Works Clearinghouse. And so there were, I think, only 3 organizations that sort of met that criteria, and ISA is the only high school level proprietary model that actually got this designation. Right? That's how we sort of can talk about ISA as a whole school reform, evidence-based whole school reform organization. So what I'd like to do is just do a very quick deep dive into one of the independent evaluation reports or studies of ISA. And this is the one that was conducted by the Academy for Educational Development, formerly known as the Academy for Educational Development. So this study had as its purpose to determine the impact of the ISA model on student high school and post-secondary outcomes. The overarching or guiding evaluation questions asked the following: what are the outcomes of ISA students in terms of high school and college enrollment? How do outcomes for ISA students compare with those of similar students in non-ISA schools? The design of this, the evaluators, they tracked the outcomes of 2 cohorts of students in ISA schools, class of 2007 and the class of 2008. They compared the high school outcomes of 1,529 students in 8 schools in New York City. And they compared those outcomes to a group of students, 1,560 comparable students in non-ISA schools, 12 non-ISA schools. And they also looked at the post-secondary enrollment and persistence outcomes of graduates of ISA schools and compared that to sort of national rates and trends. So sort of visually, this is what the study would look like. So we've heard today that when students come into ISA schools, they are typically underserved, high-need students. So in this study, let's see, about a quarter were free or reduced lunch eligible, 80% or 81% Black and Latino, 9% English language learners, 11% special ed, and a third or more entering these ISA schools in 9th grade below grade level proficiency in both reading and math. So what the study did is they compared the attendance rates, grade promotion, credit accumulation, state test performance, and 4-year graduation and dropout rates between those ISA students and a matched group of non-ISA students, matched in terms of the types of schools and the student population that they served, and also matched by all of these background characteristics. In addition, they looked at some early post-secondary outcomes, so enrollment by institution type and persistence, and so they looked at the ISA students and looked at what their outcomes were compared to students nationally. So what did the studies find? That that ISA has a positive and fairly large impact on high school and post-secondary outcomes. So let's start with that first year, that very first year of high school, that critical transition year. That is the make and break it year for many students. So here's what we know from the research. Students who succeed in 9th grade are more likely to continue to do well in subsequent years and graduate on time. We also know that being on track in 9th grade is a more accurate predictor of graduation from high school than students' background characteristics or prior academic achievement. So what this means, that second point, what this means is that sure, students who come into the 9th grade with higher sort of achievement scores are more likely to progress through high school and graduate. But it also suggests that students who come in with lower academic achievement, right, if they can get on track in 9th grade, that sort of improves their prospects for doing well through high school. So what does that mean, being on track? One of the key factors of being on track in 9th grade for graduation is high attendance in that 9th grade. And we also know that 9th graders who are promoted to 10th grade are 3.5 times more likely to stay in school and to graduate in 4 years than students who are not promoted. All right, so we know that's what the research says. So what impact does ISA or students attending an ISA school have on students in this very, very critical transitional year? What does the ISA evidence tells us? Well, the ISA evidence tells us that ISA students have a more successful academic transition into high school than their counterpart peers. All right, so let me just unpack some of that for you. So if we look at attendance, 9th grade attendance, here you see that ISA's effect on student attendance in the 9th grade. ISA students have better 9th grade attendance than their comparison peers. So if you look at the bar graph on the far left, I guess it is, that shows overall average daily attendance rates. And so you can see the difference is 92% versus 89%. That's about a 3 percentage point difference overall average, which is somewhat of a small effect. But if you unpack that, right, and you actually look at regular attendance versus chronic absenteeism, here's where you start to see some of the clear differences between the ISA students and their counterpart peers. So if you look at regular attendance, those students, or the percentage of students who had in ninth grade 90% or higher attendance rates, you can see the difference is 75 to 68%, right? 75% for ISA students that had a 90% attendance rate versus 68%. If you look at the graph at the right, shows chronic absenteeism, which the students who are attending less than 80% attendance rate, so less than 80%, that's approximately 36 days out of the school year, or on average a day a week. Here you see that the ISA students are that the comparison school students have almost double the rate of students who are chronically absent compared to ISA students. Okay. So Stephanie started off this session by showing us a very alarming graphic from the Gallup poll that showed engagement, right, and how it increases. And so to the extent that attendance is a indicator of engagement or disengagement, right, in the ninth grade, it shows that ISA is appearing to have some kind of impact on that. We heard about the role of advisory. We heard about the effects of having a dedicated team of teachers or grade level teams that discuss student progress. And so this may be some indication of the effects of those structures in some of these schools. So another indicator related to that first year as a critical transition period is student promotion, right, from 9th to 10th grade. So what this evaluation found was that students in ISA students are promoted to the 10th grade at considerably higher rates than their comparison peers. It's about a 20% effect. Nearly all ISA 9th graders were promoted to 10th grade compared to less than about 3/4 of their counterpart peers. And so if you take into account background factors like socioeconomic status, ISA 9th graders are 5 times more likely to be promoted to the 10th grade than their comparison peers. So that's 9th grade, right? That critical transition year. These are some evidence on the ISA school's effects on student promotion and attendance. So what happens after that? How do they progress to 10th and 11th and 12th grade? So here we look at attendance, and we see somewhat limited rates and differences between ISA and comparison peer attendance rates. So here we see that ISA students consistently have better attendance than their comparison peers. ISA students have better average attendance rates in 10th through 12th grade. More ISA students attain that minimum 90% attendance rates in 10th through 12th grades. And chronic absentee rates are lower among the ISA students in 10th through 12th grade. Again, when we look at the grade promotion between 10th to 11th and 11th to 12th grade, we see that ISA students have higher grade promotion rates in their second and third years in high school than their comparison peers. So you can see the difference between 88% and 71%. These are the 10th graders that are promoted to 11th grade. And you see in 12th grade, the rate is even a little bit wider, is 90 versus 76%. ISA students are promoted to 11th and to 12th grades at considerably higher rates than their counterpart peers. Again, after controlling for background characteristics like socioeconomic status, ISA 10th graders are 5 times more likely to be promoted to 11th grade. And ISA 11th graders are 3 times more likely to be promoted to 12th grade than their counterpart peers. Some other indicators of progression towards graduation Here was the evaluators looked at credit accumulation over 4 years. And what they found is over their 4 years in high school, ISA students attempted and earned more credits than their comparison peers and failed fewer core subject credits. So on average, ISA students earned 10.3 more credits and attempted 7.8 more credits over their 4 years in high school in comparison to their peers in counterpart schools. ISA students failed to earn, on average, 1.1 fewer core subject credits than their comparison peers. And again, when you control for background characteristics of ISA students are 42% less likely than their counterpart peers to fail any core subject course. Another sort of indicator of progress towards graduation are state tests performance. And so what the evaluators here found was that by the end of 12th grade, nearly all ISA students pass all 5 required state tests required for graduation. So here you see the difference between 93% test passage rates for ISA students versus 92% for their counterpart peers. So you say, well, that's a 1% difference. Keep in mind that the critical component or the critical principle of ISA, the notion of a college preparatory curriculum, and that emphasizes inquiry and numeracy, and maybe not so much test preparation, although they might be a little bit. It's not heavily focused on test preparation. And here you see some of the results of that. And I think this is probably one of the more telling pieces of evidence right there. 4-year in graduation and dropout. ISA students in 4 years graduate in 4 years at considerably higher rates than their comparison peers. So they found that over 3/4 of ISA students in this study graduated within 4 years, compared to about 2/3 of their comparison students. And that fewer ISA students than their comparison peers actually dropped out within 4 years. And when you control for student background characteristics, ISA students are almost 50% less likely to drop out than their comparison peers. So that's progress towards graduation and graduation. So the study kind of looked a little bit at college enrollment or post-secondary participation. Here they didn't compare it to similar students, but looked at sort of national trends and data points. So what they found was the students who did graduate and enroll in post-secondary institutions, they tend to enroll at higher rates in 4-year colleges compared to 2-year colleges, right? So that's 67% versus 33%. And then when you look at the college enrollment rates nationally, the ISA 4-year college enrollment rate is higher than the rate for all students nationally. This is at the time of the study, at 64%, and the national rate for Black and Latino students, which is predominantly the population of ISA schools. Persistence, they looked to see the students, ISA college students, who were persisted to their 3rd semester in college. And they looked at this at both the students that were enrolled in 4-year institutions and 2-year institutions. And what they found is that 94% of ISA graduates persisted at least to the 2nd year of college, and 74% persisted to their 3rd semester of college. And when you look at those persistence rates and you compare them to the national rates, you see that ISA college persistent rates to the 3rd semester are considerably higher than the national persistent rates at both 4-year and 2-year colleges. And finally, this is the findings from the other evaluation studies because they track those kids into 3 and 4 years later after graduation. And what they found was that a large majority of ISA students were still enrolled or had graduated 3 or 4 years later. So remember, they looked at 2 cohorts of students. This is the class of 2008 and 2007, respectively. About 20% of ISA college students dropped out, and this is a rate that is lower than the estimated 25% national dropout rate, which was the rate at that time, for students in 4-year colleges, and 50% national dropout rate for students in 2-year programs. So that's a deep dive of one of the evidence sources for ISA. All of these reports are actually posted on the ISA website. So I encourage you to sort of look through some of them so you can see, when ISA claims to be evidence-based, what that means, right? That it does have the evidence base, and this is evidence collected, external to ISA, that it has large and positive effects on student achievement, significantly improving attendance, grade promotion, credit accumulation, 4-year graduation rates, and college enrollment and persistence rates. And for me personally, it's nice to see this projection and trajectory of the students that are served by ISA. And that's it. I hope I haven't bombarded you with too much data, but I think it's important to sort of see what the continuing journey and story of ISA is as well. Okay, thank you.